The date is February 26, 1959. A search and rescue team is trudging through the deep, freezing snow of the Ural Mountains in the Soviet Union. They are looking for a group of 9 experienced hikers who vanished without a trace weeks ago. As the rescue team climbs higher onto the slope known by the local indigenous tribes as Kholat Syakhl, which literally translates to Dead Mountain, they spot something in the distance. It is a tent, but it is not standing. It is half collapsed and buried under snow. As the rescuers get closer, they realize something terrifying. The tent wasn't knocked over by the wind. It was cut open, but not from the outside. The slashes were made from the inside. Whatever happened on that mountain, it didn't attack them from the dark. The hikers were inside their safe tent, and something terrified them so much that they used their knives to slash their way out, fleeing into the freezing night without their shoes, without their coats, and without any hope of survival. What the rescuers found next would baffle investigators for over 60 years. Bodies found nearly naked in -30-degree weather. Skulls fractured, chests crushed with the force of a car crash, yet with no external bruises. One hiker missing her eyes, another missing her tongue. This is not a campfire story. This is the true, unsolved nightmare of the Dyatlov Pass Incident. 9 people went up the mountain. Nobody came down today. We retrace their final steps to understand what really happened in the snow. To understand the horror of the end, we must understand the beginning. The group was led by 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov, a brilliant engineering student and a master hiker. He assembled a team of 8 others, 7 men and 2 women in total. These were not amateurs. They were grade the hikers, the elite of the elite, training for the highest certification available in the Soviet Union. They were young, strong, and prepared for anything nature could throw at them. On January 23, 1959, the group boarded a train, laughing and singing songs, excited for the adventure ahead. Photographs recovered from their cameras later show them happy. They were hugging, playing mandolins, and documenting their journey. They looked like any group of friends on a winter vacation. There was actually a 10th member, Yeti. But days before the real climb began, Yuri fell ill with joint pain and had to turn back. He was disappointed. He hugged his friends goodbye, telling Igor to take care of everyone. Yuri didn't know it then, but that illness saved his life. He would be the only one to survive simply because he didn't go. The remaining 9 continued into the wilderness. The terrain grew harsher. The temperature dropped. By February 1st, they reached the pass. The plan was to cross over to the other side before setting up camp, but the weather turned violent. Snowstorms reduced visibility to 0. Realizing they had veered off course, Igor made a decision. Instead of going down to the forested valley, where there was wood for a fire and shelter from the wind, he decided to set up camp right there on the exposed slope of the mountain. Some experts say this was a training exercise to practice sleeping on an exposed slope. Others say it was a fatal mistake. Regardless, they pitched their large canvas tent, laid out their skis, ate a cold dinner, and prepared to sleep. According to the evidence found later, everything was calm around 5 p.m. They took off their wet boots. They laid out their blankets. Diaries found at the scene show their last entries were normal. They were joking about romance and local folklore. There was no sign of panic, no sign of danger. But sometime in the darkness of the night, chaos erupted. When the group failed to send a telegram by February 12th, families began to worry. By February 20th, a massive search operation was launched involving the army, helicopters, and volunteers. When they found the tent, it was a frozen tomb of clues that made no sense. Inside the tent, investigators found the hikers' boots lined up neatly. They found their heavy jackets. They found money, maps, and alcohol untouched. Why would 9 experienced survivalists run out into the snow without their shoes? The rescuers followed a trail of footprints leading down the slope toward a nearby forest. The footprints showed that the people were walking calmly at first, then scattering. Some were wearing only socks. Some had one shoe on. Some were barefoot. At the edge of the forest, under a large cedar tree, the first 2 bodies were found. It was Yuri and Georgi. They were dressed only in their underwear. Beside them was the charred remains of a small fire. The branches on the cedar tree were broken up to 5 meters high, suggesting that one of them had climbed the tree in a desperate attempt to look back at the tent. or to see something coming for them. Between the cedar tree and the tent, 3 more bodies were found: Igor, Dyatlov, Zineda, and Rustam. They were not together. They were spaced out, frozen in dynamic poses. The position of their bodies revealed a heartbreaking truth. They weren't running away from the tent. They were trying to crawl back to it. Despite the freezing cold, these 3 had died of hypothermia. But they had bruises on their fists, as if they had been fighting. Zineda had a bright red discoloration on her skin. But the real horror was yet to be discovered, for hikers were still missing. It took 2 months to find the remaining 4 hikers. As the spring snow began to melt in May, rescuers found them buried deep in a ravine, 75 meters away from the cedar tree. They were better dressed than the others, suggesting they had taken clothes off the dead bodies of their friends by the fire to try and stay warm. But the condition of these bodies terrified the medical examiners. Unlike the first 5 who died of cold, these 4 had died of brutal, massive trauma. One of them, Lyubo Bryniolis, had a major skull fracture. Another, Lyudmila, had broken ribs on both sides. The medical examiner compared the damage to the impact of a car crash or a shockwave from a bomb. Yet, strangely, there were no external wounds. The skin wasn't cut. It was as if they had been crushed by a massive pressure from the inside out. And then came the most disturbing details. Lyudmila was missing her tongue. She was also missing her eyes. The tissue around her mouth had been ripped away. Another hiker was missing his eyebrows. The Soviet investigators were baffled. There were no animal tracks, no signs of other humans. No avalanche debris was found that could explain the crushed chest. The tent was still standing on its poles, ruling out a massive snowslide. Tests on their clothing revealed traces of radiation. The victim's skin had turned a strange orange-brown color. Reports from other hikers in the area that night mentioned seeing strange glowing orange spheres in the sky over the mountain. The investigation was abruptly closed. The files were sent to a secret archive. The official cause of death was listed as a compelling natural force that the hikers were unable to overcome. For decades, theories have run wild. Was it a Yeti? The local tribes speak of a Menk, a forest giant. Was it aliens explaining the radiation and the glowing orbs? Was it a secret Soviet military weapon test that went wrong, causing the shock waves that crushed their chest? In 2021, modern science offered a new theory, a rare type of slab avalanche. A small, heavy block of snow could have slid down, crushing the tent and breaking their ribs while they slept, forcing them to cut their way out. The wind would have then covered the evidence of the slide. The missing eyes and tongue, perhaps scavengers and decomposition in the running water of the ravine. It is a logical explanation, and yet it fails to explain everything. It doesn't explain the radiation. It doesn't explain why experienced hikers would leave the safety of the tree line. It doesn't explain the terror that made them tear their own shelter apart. To this day, the Dyatlov Pass remains one of the most chilling mysteries in human history. 9 young people, full of life, walked into the silence of the mountains, and the mountains kept their secrets. Yuri Yudin, the 10th hiker who turned back early, lived a long life, but he spent every day haunted by the fate of his friends. Before he died in 2013, he said that if he could ask God one question, it would be, what really happened to my friends that night? We may never know the truth, but on Dead Mountain, the wind still howls, whispering the names of the 9 who never came home.